Dodge this.
What's up, YouTube? Welcome back. This is the Ambushed Apostate YouTube channel. My name is Seth, and we talk about cults and destructive groups here. We talk about high control environments, the leadership, the types of people who lead these groups, and the behaviors and their tactics that they kind of share across the board after sprinkling their own little twists and flavors into it to control the members of their groups. The goal for me making the content I make is to make sure that others don't become victims of cults like I was. I have been involved with a couple different religious cults, and not only do I tell my story here, but primarily we look at, is this cult behavior based on what we know about psychology, and specifically what high control, toxic cult behavior is according to the professionals. So let's go ahead and start this documentary by McKinnon Mitchell called The Weakness of Kent Hovind. If you've not seen it or heard of it, the link will be in the description. So without further ado, and while playing some Donkey Kong Country for the Super Nintendo, we listen to McKinnon Mitchell tell us who Kent Hovind is as a person.
Hello, my name's Kent Hovind. Good afternoon, Kent Hovind here. Hello, folks, Kent Hovind here.
Good evening, folks. Kent Hovind here and the crew at Dinosaur Adventureland. Good evening, folks. Kent Hovind here and the crew at Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama. Good evening, folks. Kent Hovind here and the crew at Dinosaur Adventureland in lovely Lenox, Alabama. Hovind here and the crew at Dinosaur Adventureland in lovely Lenox, Alabama. We're the folks who believe the Bible is literally true and scientifically accurate. God made everything in 6 days, like he said. Dinosaurs lived with man. They did not live millions of years ago. There is no geologic column. There is no fossil record. You've been lied to. We're here to help straighten that out. We think evolution is the dumbest and most dangerous religion in the history of the world. It's a mental illness. When a grown man dreams, he's related to a worm, a fern, and a frog, which all came from a dot, which came from a dot of nothing exploding. It's time to get him some serious help. Fast. Some of them are educated way beyond their intelligence, and they don't catch on. I've been taught something that's stupid.
Under the bite model of authoritarian control, under information control, what he just gave an example of is definitionally Section 1, deception. And subsection A, deliberately withhold information. There is no geologic column. There is no fossil record. Dinosaurs lived with humans. No, they didn't. Also, where's the information to support this claim? Don't worry about it. I told you. Okay. Distort information to make it more acceptable. These people are mentally ill. This is stupid. Okay? So then now you just look at people who have a differing opinion of anything that you've been taught by Kent, and you go, well, they're just stupid. They're morons. They're idiots. They're, insert whatever name you're taught to call them. This was totally normal in my group. Hey, that person's a moron. They're an idiot. Believe what they believe? It's divisive, but it's also dishonest.
Kent Hovind is an interesting guy. I mean, you've got a guy who grew up in a small town in Illinois, and over time was one of the most sought-after creationist speakers in America. The problem is that he's interesting in the wrong kind of way. Charles Manson is interesting, but there's no sane person who views him in a positive light. The details of the Chernobyl disaster are interesting, but it's not something anyone would have ever wanted to have experienced for themselves. Kent Hovind falls into a similar category, and how he got there was entirely of his own accord. There's no one that Kent can factually point to and say, all of these things happened in my life because of this person or that person. Where Kent is today is because of Kent.
Although Kent will try and does blame everything else in his life on everyone else but himself. Cult leaders typically are malignant narcissists, and a common trait of a malignant narcissist is not possessing the ability to look somebody in the face and genuinely say, I'm sorry. I was wrong, and I hope one day you can forgive me for the thing that I did to you, because I know it hurt you, and I apologize. He doesn't possess that quality. He doesn't understand that sometimes taking responsibility is the right thing to do. So he passes it to everyone else, and it's literally been everyone else's fault in Kent's mind. But as we're going to see, he's dug his own grave, and then he's pointing at everybody else going, why did you dig this hole?
you've never heard of Kent Hovind, you wouldn't be to blame. He's a figure who has largely been ostracized from any community he has ever come into contact with, including his own family. So much so that he now resides in a place called Lenox, Alabama, surviving off the goodwill of others. Kent Hovind is a creationist Christian who suggests that the theory of evolution is a lie and that the Bible is literally true, and
the evolution theory is the dumbest and most dangerous religion in the history of the planet.
there's been plenty who have voiced their opinions about him. Some think he is a godly man serving the Lord proudly. Some view him as an uneducated preacher.
Shouts out to Professor Dave as well. I've learned more science in the past 3 years from people like him, Forrest Valkai, Gutsit Gibbon, and others than I ever did under Kent Hovind and Bill Gothard and the like. So if you don't know Professor Dave, go check him out.
Loudly arguing against a subject he drastically misunderstands. Others view him as a con man and a highly abusive individual, both mentally and physically.
This is my house!
Damn phone.
What are you doing, Cindy?
The following documentary is in no way an argument against evolution or against creationism at all. The single, sole reason behind this series is to disclose the story behind Kent Hovind and those who have been hurt by him. Nothing more. The story deserves to be told in a manner befitting its circumstances. His victims deserve it to be told in a manner that recognizes the pain he put them through. This is their story, just as much as it's Kent's.
I mean, mad respect to McKinnon Mitchell, because that is what this is about. And it's great to hear it coming from the producer of this. This is for the victims. And I raised my hand, but my miseducation, I guess you would say, the intentional deception of my, science lessons pales in comparison to people like Cindy Lincoln and his other 3 wives, I'm sure, in various ways. But he's an abusive psychopath, and he has had actual, real victims that pale in comparison to me. But this is for everyone that his toxic, dishonest, nonsensical teachings impacted. And I love that about the creator of this content. Let's continue.
Kent was raised in East Peoria, Illinois, a modestly sized town in the 1960s and 70s. Over time, I have attempted to reach out to those who knew Kent, whether it be individuals he has mentioned, schools he has attended, or churches he was attached to. None have opted to comment. Details of his early life tend to begin at East Peoria High School, where Kent graduated from in 1971. In 1969, he claims to have given his heart to the Lord, becoming a born-again Christian. After his conversion to Christianity, Kent began attending Bethel Baptist Church in Pekin, Illinois, a short 8-mile drive from East Peoria. Once Kent graduated high school, he attended Illinois Central College, which would be the only accredited higher education that Kent would receive. During this time, he would work for Bethel Baptist Church until he later transferred to Midwestern Baptist College in 1972, at the time located in Pontiac, Michigan, where Kent remained until 1974. The following years set up a fundamental foundation for his future and are worth exploring. Midwestern was a completely unaccredited university founded by Pastor Tom Malone, a once famous preacher who passed away on January 7, 2007. Tom Malone was a major figure of the independent fundamentalist Baptist movement, a small, insignificant, but loud sect of Christianity that fiercely opposes modernism and liberalism. Malone's purpose behind the formation of Midwestern Baptist College in 1953 was more about character building rather than education. To get a clearer picture of Midwestern Baptist College in the 1970s and for Pastor Tom Malone as well, I sat down with Bruce Gurenser, a Midwestern Baptist College alum from 1976 to 1979 who has since left the church and his faith altogether.
I just want to point out that they just showed a bunch of people within this extreme version of Christianity. Matt Powell, Steven Anderson, Greg Locke, obviously this pastor who was very influential to Kent. Keep in mind that the leaders of these cults are very rarely original. They simply take the same talking points from fellow extremists and regurgitate them in their echo chamber. They copy each other because once you get to a certain level of extreme and insanity, there's really nowhere else to go, so you just kind of pass around the same kind of buzzwords and the hate speech and all the other stuff, and they just pass it around. They're not original. They're copycats. They're fakes. They've all figured out the scam and the scheme, and they're implementing it. That's the reality. And good for this guy for getting out completely.
In the interview, Bruce explained that the students of the college were mandated to attend Pastor Malone's church, which was highly conservative in nature, and pressed upon its students that a secular education was not advised. Bruce explained that he agreed with the sentiment that independent fundamentalist Baptist churches seem to either produce or attract individuals of a narcissistic disposition, and mentions that the college had misogynistic mentalities towards women. Over the years, Bruce would drift from these beliefs, though maintaining his marriage still to this day with his wife Polly, who he met at Midwestern.
I do think it's super cool that he deconstructed and is still married. A lot of relationships don't make it out of the deconstruction phase if one person does it and the other one's still in it. It doesn't usually end well, so good for them. One more quick point is the BITE model under behavior control specifically lays out when groups tell you where you have to go, meetings you have to attend, and information you have to consume. Under information control, it goes further and says who you can get the information from, who you can't. All of these things are enforced by a culture of shaming, belittling, making someone feel like they're not even saved if they do one of these things wrong. And this is how Kent grew up, because the pastor of this church did the exact same thing to him. The leadership of this school did the exact same thing to him that he's doing to his cult members now. It is quite literally a cycle of abuse. And I think I've heard Cults to Consciousness talk about that exact topic. I believe it was their channel. They're amazing. I love that channel. Excellent content. Let's continue.
It just became quite oppressive. Here we are in 2022, and those churches are still churning out that same kind of thinking. Their colleges are still churning out preachers who preach those things, and it's harmful. I'm sure I will be called a failure, on that regard, and I will admit that I was, but I tried, and so yeah.
I'll just say I feel for that guy, because when looking back, you're like, dude, because I've seen behaviors that I know I picked up from the last guy I sat under. 110%. The way that I've treated people before, the way I've talked to people, the way I've thought about people was a carbon copy of how the leader of my last group treated people. And I look at it now, and yeah, it'll bring a tear to your eye, because you're like, I treated people like... And I thought it was right. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought it was normal. That's a rough pill to swallow. You're not a failure, bro. You bought into some really bad ideas. You subscribe to some really messed up theology. Good people fall for bad things all the time. But it's what you do when you realize you're in it and how you move forward. Do you stay in it and continue? Do you intentionally, once you realize what you're doing, continue to hurt people on purpose? Or do you go, wow, I gotta go. This is wrong. That's what really counts. But yes, absolutely, it is harmful on every measurable level. And I left a group that was a mix between Kent Hovind's philosophy and theology, sort of a little bit of a David Koresh vibe. Waco, get ready for the war with the government type situation. If Christian nationalism and independent fundamental Baptists had a child together. But yes, harmful is an understatement. I really like that guy.
From the research that I've gathered, I believe it was Kent's years at Midwestern under the influence of Tom Malone that shaped Kent into who he is today. They both believe that the King James Version of the Bible is the only one worth reading. They both, like the Bible, think homosexuality is an abomination.
Homosexuality is wrong, it's evil, it's wicked, I think it's stupid.
time out. We got to address it with the bite model. So his claim is that homosexuality is all these things, and then he tacks on stupid. He calls things evil a lot. He delegitimizes any opinion that he doesn't support or subscribe to. And if we look under thought control, under subsection 10, we see labeling alternative belief systems, lifestyles, choices that a human being should be allowed to make as illegitimate, evil, and not useful. Keep that in mind as we continue to listen to Kent, because not only does he say, hey, I don't agree with that, I think it's a sin, next question. It's those people are stupid, those people are dumb, those people are whatever, those people are every slur you can possibly think of. Those people are subhuman. He said it earlier. People who believe that evolution is a thing is, the same as being mentally ill. This is Kent Hovind, but this behavior and this verbiage is not normal, and it is classified as cult behavior. So keep that in mind.
They both, like the Bible, think men are the head of the house.
I think sometimes people are afraid to speak about the husband being the head of the home. But we shouldn't fear what the Bible teaches. God made it that way. Well, I've heard women say, well, he's the head, but I'm the neck. I'll turn him any way I want to. No, you won't. Not if he's a real man.
That means do whatever it takes. And the NIFB, by the way, fully supports spousal discipline. And just so we're clear, it's not mutual. It's the husband physically beating the woman for not doing what she's told. And people like Steven Anderson and Kent Hovind subscribe to this idea. That is dangerous. And that is insane, and that is why I'm pointing this stuff out. This is psychopathic behavior. What that guy just said is psychotic. Not if he's a real man, because he'll yoke your up and, like Kent did, body slam you to the ground if you step out of line. Got it? Disgusting, actually.
What did she call her husband? My Lord. Now, because of this one statement right here, she ended up listed in the New Testament as the perfect wife. Likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands. You just have to submit.
They both think the Bible is literally true, believe the world to be 6,000 or so years old, and advocate for baptism by immersion in water. But there is one key element to Kent's time at Midwestern, and it comes from Tom Malone. In a 1971 sermon titled, Can America Survive This?, Malone had a few statements against evolution. In part 3 of the sermon, Malone explains, Evolution has been taught in the schools of this country for the last 60 years, from the wee grades of elementary school right on through college. You cannot be an evolutionist and a believer in the Word of God at the same time. Evolution is not just a theory. It is a wicked attack against the Bible.
Again, I mean, honestly, we just went over it, and it's going to be a reoccurring theme. I'm not going to keep bringing it up, but this is thought control. By definition, it's evil. He literally just said it exactly as it's written in the bite model. It's evil. And the reason, just let me help everybody out here. The reason that evolution's been taught, we understand that dinosaurs did not live with humans, and we understand scientifically that the Earth is absolutely older than 6,000 to 10,000 years. That is a fictional fantasy land for some people, and it's okay to live there until you start teaching it to everyone as fact. You can hold the ridiculous belief if you want to, but it doesn't make it true. Just keep that in mind.
A young Kent Hovind, sitting in the congregation, absorbing these ideas like a sponge. It doesn't seem to be a stretch to assume that Kent is simply an imitator, lacking the intelligence to form conclusions of his own. or the ability to take what he has learned and form new conclusions based upon his education that his educators may not have. Kent's disgust for atheists and views against evolution are not original. He's just a copy of Tom Malone. Yet, Kent failed in one area of following in Tom Malone's footsteps. He was ordained on May 25, 1974 at Emmanuel Baptist Church. Kent returned to Pekin, Illinois, back to Bethel Baptist Church, where he eventually became pastor in 1976 after the previous pastor resigned for reasons unknown to me. Kent lasted just 2 years as pastor before resigning in 1978 and moved his family to Bourbonnais, Illinois, where he would teach at Faith Baptist Church. Currently, the church boasts their Faith Baptist Academy, but indicates that this academy did not begin until 1995. I'm sure he did teach in some capacity at this church, but whatever records of their students, faculty, or records of any kind do not seem to have been transferred into any digital format to be researched. The pastor at Faith Baptist Church, Bob Gray Sr., left the church for Longview Baptist Temple in Longview, Texas. Bob Gray Sr., who has refused to comment in any capacity in regards to Kent Hovind, invited Kent in 1981 to join him in Longview, Texas. Kent agreed and moved his family there, where he claims to have taught math and science at the Longview Christian Academy. He remained there until 1986, where he then went to become assistant pastor and principal at Calvary Baptist Christian School until 1989, when he moved the family to Pensacola, Florida.
I just want to point out that I have seen this trend both with people like Kent and others, as well as the leader of my last group. And this is where they will go to a church, they'll stay for a year or two, and then they move out of state and go to another one. And then they move out of state and go to another one. And then they move down the road and go to another one. And they're there for a couple years, and it's almost like everywhere they go, normal, middle-of-the-road Christians don't want anything to do with them. And they eventually end up on their own piece of property, fenced off typically, secluded typically, and absolutely free of any type of permits, inspections, taxes, fees, anything that a normal person would have to pay for a business. And then they just run the place out of their backyard and they say, look, you either agree with me or you can hit the road, Jack. And if you cause any problems while you're hitting the road, well, we'll get there.
That decision marked the beginning of Kent's second phase of his evangelist life and the decisions that would destroy his future.
Yeah, closet extremist, transition into open extremist. Not even shy about it. That's the second phase of Kent's ministry.
While his wife, Jo, finished her degree in music, Kent began studying for his master's and doctorate degree from 1988 until 1991 from Patriot Bible University. This study was done via correspondence, and while that process is a legitimate means for receiving higher education, Patriot Bible University is an unaccredited university and is categorized as a diploma mill. A diploma mill is defined as a company or organization that has a low bar of requirements for study and a high bar for payment of said diploma. I have made multiple efforts to talk to the staff at Patriot Bible University, but nearly all have refused, all with the exception of a woman named Tony. I asked about the courses that Patriot Bible University offers and details of what my study would look like should I wish to enroll with their university, to which her answers mimicked that of the description on Creation Wiki. No professors. The students are expected to study and learn on their own. The materials that Patriot Bible provided on creationism were predominantly from the works of Dr. Henry Morris, who, unlike Kent, has a legitimate doctorate, but it's a doctorate in engineering. Henry Morris has no degrees of any kind in evolutionary biology, geology, paleontology, or anything outside of civil engineering and hydraulic engineering. Despite Henry Morris having no higher education in these studies, it should come as no surprise that Kent Hovind, like with Tom Malone, produces no originality to the topic of evolution and instead regurgitates the arguments produced from someone who had no education in the topics he discussed.
There is no evidence at all for evolution in the fossil record.
This textbook says the fossil record provides some of the strongest evidence that species evolved over time. This is just plain silly.
You've got to have buried animals and plants. They've got to be buried by sediments and furthermore buried quickly.
See, fossils don't form unless they're buried quickly.
So you date the fossil by the rocks and the rocks by the fossils. Both are based on evolution. And you begin to see, I hope, that we're involved in a vast circle of reasoning here.
If the layers are dated by the fossils and the fossils are dated by the layers, that is absolute stupidity.
It would take a long time to form that canyon by the river gradually eroding it down at the bottom. And matter of fact, it would take a long time for all the sediments with their layers there to be deposited too. You'd think, but no, as a matter of fact, all of those sedimentary layers, fine stratified sediments, were formed in essentially one day, and the canyon was eroded in essentially one day.
One of the biggest lies they teach the kids in school is that it took millions of years to make Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon formed in less than a week.
The Grand Canyon formed in a week. From a doctor of a diploma mill. Cool story, Kent, but we're gonna hang out in reality.
And other versions might say sea monsters or something else, but the word in the Hebrew is tanin, which is in other parts of the Old Testament translated dragons. God created the great dragons of the world. What's that? That's the dinosaurs. That's what they used to be called.
You say, Brother Hovind, is this a fire-breathing dragon? Yep, sure is. The Bible talks about fire-breathing dragons.
They died out fairly recently, and maybe they haven't died out completely. We still get reports every once in a while.
And there might be a few still alive.
This is what an echo chamber looks like. You get people who have identical beliefs inside of a vacuum, and they just continue to regurgitate it back and forth, and everybody hears it and repeats it and hears it and repeats it, and the more people who are in this echo chamber, the more it strengthens their belief in this thing, even though in most cases, especially with Kent, it is completely devoid of anything factual and doesn't, in fact, exist in reality. He thinks fire-breathing dinosaurs were real. Actually real. On Earth. Walking around with humans less than 6,000 years ago.
The vast majority of his higher education is worthless, and his arguments are from someone who merely studied engineering. Kent Hovind is not educated, he is simply good at memorizing arguments and regurgitating them, which provides the explanation behind why Kent repeats the same responses he gives to questions in regards to evolution, regardless of how different the questions may be. Because all he knows is what Henry Morris and Tom Malone told him. This is something that Aaron Raw noted in his review of Kent Hovind's series Lies in the Textbooks, saying,
"It's not just that the preacher doesn't have an accredited degree and obviously never studied any of the things he speaks about so authoritatively. It's worse than that. He apparently doesn't know what any of the words he uses actually mean, according to the scientists who define them. That's why his criticisms don't make sense. He shows no hint that he even knows what he's saying."
I love Aaron Raw. So much respect for that dude. And his work has helped me so much. Matter of fact, in the description, I'm going to put a playlist about Noah's flood. That was one of the first things during my deconstruction that I was like, okay, none of this version coming from the Bible lines up with reality. And here's, I think, 8 separate fields of study that demonstrate this. The guy really, his content in a very low point in my life helped me understand it's going to be okay. And here's how reality works. I respect that about him a lot.
It's one thing for your lessons to be inspired by the people who taught you. In fact, that's inevitable. But it's another to just repeat it. That's not education. If I were to simply read to you the words from an expert on how a nuclear power plant works, the information I regurgitate could be correct, but that doesn't make me an expert on nuclear power plants, because I have no training or education in that field. I myself would not be the reliable source. Now, it's important to point out that Kent's behavior as a parrot doesn't by default mean he is wrong. I, of course, believe he is, but the point I am specifically making here, as I mentioned at the beginning of the documentary, isn't to argue against his creationist claims. The point is to review Kent Hovind and the fact that he is not a reliable source of information on the topic of evolution, because all he does is regurgitate the works of another person, and said person was only educated in engineering. Everything that is Kent Hovind is bootleg plagiarism. The title of the documentary is The Weakness of Kent Hovind, and one of Kent's weaknesses is simply that Kent is an unextraordinary person. More correctly, his weakness isn't just that he is unextraordinary, but that he has a problem with that. It's not enough that he is just a person like everyone else. He desires to be above others. Pastor Tom Malone and Henry Morris are men that I feel confident enough to assume that Kent viewed as extraordinary. He witnessed people respecting them. He witnessed people listening to them, seeking their advice. He wanted to be them. He wanted authority.
Every military of every country in the world knows you have to have a chain of command, and you have to obey the officer over you. What first thing God said to Adam and Eve when they sinned in the garden in Genesis chapter 3, he said, Adam, you got to work for a living now, bud. Eve, he's the boss.
Kent is just a cheap imitation of them. And deep down, I believe he knows it. He knows he is unextraordinary.
I've just got to be honest. I saw it firsthand for a long time. The people that the leader of these groups imitate, that they really truly respect, not only do they just flat out plagiarize them, they want people to respect them as much as they respect the people they are looking to. And I really do believe that it gets under some people's skin so much that they try to force it. And that's when the really ugly side of these damaged, broken, sad people who lead these groups start really lashing out at the people around them because they're just upset that they're not as popular as their favorite extremist. Then they get dangerous, and that's when it gets bad. You know, that's the scary part. But everything that McKinnon Mitchell has said so far is not only describing Kent to a T, but is checking boxes in my head like crazy. Because this right here has so many similarities to the groups I've been involved in, and that's groups with an S. We're going to get into some of that at a later time, but wasn't just the last one, but the fact that they are so similar has just got me checking boxes going, you know what? As tough as it is to talk about, I'm on the right path. And yeah, I've been exposed to several cults. I just want to say on that note, the woman is supposed to be submissive. That idea and that notion is probably the most toxic thing for a marriage that you could possibly do, because it puts the wife on a lower level than the husband, and it gives the husband free rein in his mind to talk to his wife any way he feels like, in some cases to physically abuse his wife when she's not submitting good enough. And the worst part about it is the 1,000 cuts that it puts into your marriage when you look at your wife like a subordinate. I wish somebody would have told me, treat your wife like an equal in every way. Lean on her as much as she leans on you, and listen to her. Y'all put your heads together. Work together. Think together. Choose the life you're living together as equals. Figure out your individual roles, but you're the same. And instead, it was this toxic. And that's some I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life, because those cuts are still there. That damage has been done. The ship has sailed, since caught fire and sank. But I have to live with, because of people like Kent Hovind, this idea of a object that is supposed to submit to your will instead of an equal life partner is so on every level and causes so much pain. I am ashamed, deeply ashamed, that I let myself can subscribe to this, because it does a number on a marriage. So yes, this is why I cover what I cover. because as much as I'm over it now in this moment, moving forward in life, the damage I did to people that I truly cared about is sickening, and it was not only encouraged by people like Kent, but this was the right way. This was the godly way. You bring your wife into submission if she gets out of line. And it's toxic, and it kills marriages. It kills relationships. I think we're actually going to put a pin in this. It has been running a little bit long, but I also would like to leave it on that real note, because the fact of the matter is healing hurts, and since I've decided to kind of go through some therapy in a very public way, these emotional things happen sometimes, but I think it is important for others to see the processing of this damage. If for no other reason than they look over at their spouse after watching this video and go, we got to find a new church, like, before next Sunday. And, I just think that is something that people can relate to, and I think it's something that needs to be shown, because it's the reality of these toxic groups that meet in their backyards and stockpile weapons and pervert Scripture to such an extent that they use it as a weapon to control people. This is the result. So, again, thank you for watching. We're going to get out of here. Until next time, in the meantime, take a look at the rest of this documentary. I don't mind if you skip ahead. You'll enjoy it, I promise. The Weakness of Kent Hovind by McKinnon Mitchell. It is in the description. Leave him some love in the comments. And until we come back for the next episode, my name is Seth. This is the Ambushed Apostate YouTube channel. Please don't get ambushed.
Dodge this.